Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the Hurricane Season 2020 update per the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion for September 10th, 2020, recorded around 2:40 p.m. Eastern Time. Taking a look at what's going on there across the tropical Atlantic right now, we have a lot to discuss on this busy peak of the hurricane season day. As fitting for the peak, we do have 7 areas to watch. First of all, we do have Invest Area 94L, which really doesn't even have much more of a chance. A weak, disorganized area of low pressure that is moving across portions of the Western Atlantic, expected to move over South Carolina and North Carolina tomorrow, tonight into tomorrow. Again, showers and thunderstorms generally is the main interest of concern for those areas. We also have 2 other disturbances, one to the west of Florida right now. This area over the next couple of days will kind of dive off towards the west-southwest, eventually kind of making its way into the Bay of Campeche, which we'll have to watch for development there. Given that this area is very warm in the Gulf of Mexico, I wouldn't be surprised to see some development over the next couple of days. And then another area of disturbance and disturbed weather to the east of Bermuda, or to the east of the Bahamas right now, moving off towards the west. This will impact, obviously, the Bahamas and portions of Florida over the next several days or so, mainly in the form and fashion of heavy rainfall, and then could have a shot to develop as it moves into the Gulf and maybe even into portions of Louisiana. So obviously, for folks down there that got hit by Hurricane Laura, just something to be mindful of. Again, this isn't really expected to become a strong hurricane or anything, but of course, we'll just have to watch and wait to see how things go. And then, of course, Tropical Storm Paulette, Tropical Storm Rene, and also soon-to-be Invest Area 95L with more energy back over Africa. Looking at the closer-up shots real quick, obviously, Tropical Storm Paulette and Rene down here, both struggling with vertical wind shear, which we'll discuss these in a much kind of closer-up topic here in a moment. A large area of energy, soon to be Invest Area 95L, and the more energy gathering over Africa likely to come off. And the problem here is that these are coming off at a little bit lower of a latitude than we saw with Rene and Paulette. First of all, Tropical Storm Paulette and Rene came out near Dakar and also near the Cabo Verde Islands, which is right here. These 2 tropical waves are coming off to the south of the Cabo Verde Islands, which basically means it has a straight shot basically into the Caribbean, which we'll talk about and discuss some of those impacts here in a moment. Again, this is soon to be Invest Area 95L, basically almost certain to make a beeline into the Caribbean, and probably Invest Area 96L up here, which again will probably move off to the north here, but deep layer ridging is expected to build back in over the tropical Atlantic and would probably force these both to the west. Our 3 systems out here across the tropics, again, really 94L, we can X out ourselves. These 2 systems right here will be something to monitor. Again, this little system right here will probably dive west-southwest and will have a better shot at developing into a tropical cyclone over the next couple of days. And obviously, this system nearing the Bahamas will also have to be watched for additional development as it enters the Florida Straits, and if it can avoid much of any land impact, this will certainly have a better shot for developing. Now, Tropical Storm Paulette, this is one thing that we now have to discuss more on a hotter topic, and maximum sustained winds, first of all, are near 50 miles per hour. Additional weakening is expected because of shear, but you can see this is now expected to become a hurricane by Monday morning and is expected to be near Bermuda. And the official Hurricane Center forecast has this moving off towards the west and then kind of swinging north here near Bermuda. Again, this could be several hundred miles to the west of Bermuda, or a couple hundred miles to the east of Bermuda, or kind of a split down the middle right into Bermuda. So for folks there, obviously in Bermuda, the time is now that you have to prepare for your hurricane preparedness plans, and you need to have them ready in case that, Paulette does become a hurricane, and a strong one over Bermuda. And it is likely that we are likely to probably see a strong hurricane nearing Bermuda within 4 to 5 days. And the pattern is very evolving, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But again, the general impacts for Bermuda, obviously very heavy winds, Very heavy rainfall, flooding, the general concerns with a hurricane landfall in Bermuda, and the Hurricane Center forecast does take this right over the island of Bermuda. So for folks obviously there, this is something that we're going to have to monitor very carefully, because this could be an approaching hurricane to Bermuda over the next several days or so. But the pattern remains very uncertain, which we'll show here in a moment. Now, Tropical Storm Rene is also expected to become a hurricane. There's the Cabo Verde Islands right here. This has moved west, generally west-northwest from the Cabo Verde Islands. This is now expected to become a hurricane over portions of Saturday and Sunday, and then weakening into a tropical storm as it approaches the North Atlantic Basin. A big ridge of high pressure is going to be building back over the Western Atlantic Basin, or the Eastern Atlantic Basin. This should really hinder much of any significant northward progression, and actually may block and send Rene further westward over the next several days or so. So this is going to be something that we're going to have to watch pretty carefully, because again, this may move further westward than currently anticipated, and this is going to be something obviously to watch going forward with time. But this should be weakening, and again, a weaker storm at this point is going to mean a weaker storm is going to go further westward, and we're going to show that here in a moment. First of all, with Tropical Storm Paulette, again, maximum sustained winds now of about 50 miles per hour, so it is weakening. You can see a lot of that south and southwesterly shear that's being impinged on our storm right now. Deep convection firing generally to the north with a partially exposed low-level center further off towards the south, with little, if any, deep convection around there. There is probably some shallow convection rotating in here from time to time, but generally all of the deep convection is positioned off towards the north. So we do have vortex tilting with height, with the mid and low-level centers being displaced from one another. This is causing, obviously, some intrusions of dry air. We saw that kind of happen earlier, where we could see the convective canopy actually dissipate here for a while before new deep convection actually fired. But we did have those showers and thunderstorms. Again, you can almost see earlier that we almost had nothing in a fully exposed low-level center, which has now kind of become, once again, partially exposed. But by and large, most of the showers and thunderstorms are positioned well to the north of this low-level center at the moment, because of all this shear that's being impinged right now. And our shear is expected to peak over the next about 12 hours, so additional weakening is probable throughout that time frame. If you look here at Tropical Storm Rene, much of the same thing is going on here. We actually can see partial exposure of the low-level center. We can see some of that convective canopy actually weakening now with little deep convection firing near the center of circulation at the moment, which this also means that this is getting sheared from the east. We're getting some easterly shear being impinged on our storm right now, pushing these storms off towards the western side of the convection, and also dry air entrainments from time to time because of the vortex tilting with height. So both of these storms are struggling this afternoon. But again, Rene and Paulette should both become hurricanes over the next couple of days. But again, Rene should be on the weaker end, obviously, because the shear is going to really significantly hinder much of any rapid intensification over the next several days or so. Now we can see here on the GFS sounding, the vortex sounding average on the GFS. This is basically out to about 2 o'clock this afternoon. We notice here that in the low levels, this is basically the wind barbs. We're starting off here from the first 3 kilometers in the atmosphere and going all the way up to about the 11 kilometer layer in the atmosphere. And what I want you to pay attention to is the direction of the winds, first starting off here at the low levels and how they veer up to the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere. We can see here that in the first about 3 kilometers, at about surface to 3 kilometer layer here of the wind is actually out of the west. We're getting a westerly wind here on the kind of 3 kilometer, surface to 3 kilometer layer. But as we kind of go throughout height up to about 5 to 11 kilometers, we start to get more of a northeasterly direction here. We start to actually see some northeast direction of this wind, and we can see here that in these shear plots, we're getting about 35 knots of vertical wind shear in the 200 from the 850 to 200 millibar layer in the atmosphere. And because of this change in direction, we're getting a lot of vertical wind shear over Paulette right now. We can also see here, if you look very carefully at the kind of the southeast quadrant of the corner right here, there is Tropical Storm Rene right there, which is also experiencing easterly shear around a much broader upper level anticyclone right now. But generally for Paulette, again, this surface to 3 kilometer layer is generally out all of the westerly direction. As we start to get up to about the 5 to 11 kilometer layer, especially about the 9 to 10 to 11 kilometer layer, we start to get more of a northeast flow at the upper levels in the atmosphere. And one of the reasons why that is because here on the GFS 500 millibar geopotential heights here, you're looking at roughly a weakness in the ridge kind of all the way out through here. This is actually a tropical upper tropospheric trough, a TUT feature over the Atlantic Basin right now, stretching all the way from the Azores Islands and the Canaries all the way down. And this is actually impacting Tropical Storm Paulette right now. We can see that here on the 200 millibar layer winds here, that our center of this TUT feature is actually located over the Azores, or just north of there. And the impacts here and kind of the feelings basically of this TUT is all the way down here across the tropical Atlantic. So the TUT's influence is all the way down here, and we can actually see some southwesterly shear being impinged on our storm right now. Now, if we move this kind of going forward, at least for the next 18 hours, that shear kind of continues, but it will lessen. Now, at this time, again, in the upper levels of the atmosphere, we see this big ridge of high pressure stretching over the western and North Atlantic Basin right now. If we kind of progress here through 24 hours, what starts to happen is you notice that we have this trough right now over the kind of the Canadian prairies, basically. What this is going to end up doing is actually move, kind of dip west-southwest into the Canadian Maritimes and then kind of get caught in the easterlies. And this is all part of this large kind of trough feature over the North Atlantic Basin, basically over the high seas. And we can start to see that after 24 hours, this big ridge of high pressure does start to kind of abate and weaken a lot much more. Now, this is also what would probably be Hurricane Rene on the model. And again, but right now, Rene kind of moves off towards the west-northwest. Now, you notice that both of them right now is kind of being controlled by this ridge of high pressure to the north and a relative lack of ridging over the North Atlantic. We have a lot of troughiness and a tropical upper tropospheric trough in throughout this region. Now, if we go out even further here on the shear out to about hour 48, now we start to see the shear direction actually kind of lessen with only about 10 knots of vertical wind shear positioned over Tropical Storm Paulette. There's an upper level anticyclone right here, or an upper level low sitting right over into the south and west of Paulette. So this would be actually still kind of inducing a little bit of shear, but it is light shear. It's not very strong shear at all. Now, at this time here, if we go out to hour 48, this ridge has significantly weakened now, and we're getting the influence of this trough to the north to kind of carry our storms further up and away. Now, one would think that these storms would have a pretty strong chance to get on out to sea. Now, at least that's probably going to be the case with Rene, but with Paulette, there's a different story occurring here. First of all, because of the fact that Paulette has time to weaken here within this area, or, basically off towards the north, we see what actually happens is the storm starts to get carried a little bit further westernly. Now, the reason why that is first of all, Rene over here could actually help, its outflow may actually help to create a little bit of an anticyclone, or basically a ridge over this area right here, which is not being picked up very well on the model. Because obviously a strong storm, it produces an upper level anticyclone, but that anticyclone is also a ridge of high pressure over top of the storm. Basically, those two features are co-located, and it reduces vertical wind shear within the storm environment. However, we also notice a ridge of high pressure kind of building right now over the northeast United States and over the Canadian Maritimes. We also have a cutoff flow here trying to inject into this area of low pressure, and another ridge building over the western United States. Now, if we go forth with time, this ridge actually starts to build back in over the North Atlantic Basin, and we get a more of a westerly tug in the storm. Now, one of the more important things is how weak does Paulette get, at least in the short term? Because the weakness right now, and we just kind of showed that, we'll go back to that, the surface to 3 kilometer layer in the atmosphere, and even probably all the way up really to at least maybe even the 4 kilometer layer in the atmosphere, does suggest about west or west southwesterly motion in the atmosphere. So the weaker that Paulette does get in the short term, it's more likely to turn further off towards the west here. And if you get an initial starting motion that's kind of more like this, you have to watch pretty carefully is how does this overall evolution kind of play out. If in fact that we do get the storm to kind of move on a little bit more of a westerly track first of all, and then it kind of makes that west-southwest swing, it gets it ending, it kind of gets it closer to land here. Now, if we kind of move even more forward, we can kind of see that this starts to kind of progress something like that, and then we start to get that motion. But you notice where it is. It's actually west of Bermuda. And we do have a ridge of high pressure that's starting to build now over top of the storm environment. And by hour 120, this is just sitting west of Bermuda at this time with a ridge trying to establish itself. But we also have another trough right here that's kind of digging in, going to break down this ridge. And there is a pathway out to sea. But you notice what occurs here. We actually get pressures down to about 960 millibars here on the GFS. This is actually about 966, and it actually deepens it almost into the high 950s. And that is in response due to a upper level anticyclone developing over a system, lower vertical wind shear, and now we have a shear that is under about 10 knots or so being impeded on our system. So this is likely to strengthen pretty significantly as it approaches Bermuda. But again, where exactly this goes is going to determine on how weak Paulette gets in the short term. And again, Paulette is not likely to see significant weakening because you can see these convective bursts from time to time that is occurring near our storm. But if we do get a time where our storm actually does not have convection, like we saw basically here earlier, where we had kind of this relative lull in the convection, it is entirely possible that what may actually end up happening is we get, a storm to kind of degrade a little bit more. And right now, since it is still about 50 miles per hour, it is not fully rooted in the mid-level kind of fields of the atmosphere. So we may see an additional kind of westward shift here and maybe a little bit kind of sneaking like that. So we're going to have to really watch, and it actually may be on the far western side of the National Hurricane Center cone. Now, one other thing that I did want to point out here is on the GFS, obviously we do have a very strong storm here. This is also going to probably help to induce impacts to the United States right along the coast. And again, coastal impacts are expected to kind of be felt here to the United States in the terms of high surf and rough seas, and obviously rip currents. Those are going to be some concerns along the United States coastline all the way out into the North Atlantic and the Canadian Maritimes as we kind of progress throughout the next couple of days. But this is 5 days out, and even you can see here that on the GFS forecast, it really, did not have a strong ridge in place at that time. And that ridge has kind of significantly led to a much further west storm than was anticipated a couple of days ago. So this is something that we're going to have to watch as we progress throughout time. We are also watching soon-to-be Invest 95L, which is kind of coming into the screen right here. And also this tropical disturbance in the model field. In the 850 vorticity, you can actually see some cyclonic flow right here approaching the Louisiana coastline. So this is something that we'll have to watch. Generally, heavy rain can be expected there. And we also notice maybe even an approaching hurricane into the Lesser Antilles, beyond the next couple of days. And then that moves into the North Atlantic Basin, basically. Now, one thing I did want to kind of point out is that this is the Euro forecast, the 0Z run of the Euro, showing much of the same thing, but you can kind of see that we do have the storm that actually moves near or right over Bermuda, and we get a stronger trough in through here that pulls Paulette further north and probably right over Bermuda. So this is going to be something that we're going to have to watch. But again, nothing is set in stone at this time, but there is several areas to watch. Again, right now, the greatest land concerns is going to be from these two tropical disturbances out here. But in the long term, 5 or 6 days out, 4, 5, 6 days out, Paulette could be a problem, a potential problem for Bermuda. And then obviously Invest Area 95L moving almost a sure shot into the Caribbean somewhere. So for folks down here in the Lesser Antilles, all the way from Trinidad and Tobago, all the way north to near Puerto Rico, do need to be monitoring the progress of this, as this will likely be something to monitor as we go forth with time. All right. So with that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon and early evening. I'll be back with another video forecast update this evening. But in the meantime, have a great rest of your afternoon and early evening. I'll talk to you guys again some more later this evening. Stay safe, everyone. I'll talk to you guys some later this evening.